McLaren has been an established maker of supercars now for just over a decade. And while the first half of that decade brought pretty much nothing but good news, the second half has definitely been more challenging for the company. Of course, nobody said setting up shop as a key rival to some of the most successful and well-known car brands in the world, the likes of Ferrari, Porsche, Lamborghini, nobody said that was easy. But now the worst of the pandemic is behind us, the company is in a brighter, more positive mood, and it's looking to the future, specifically with this, the all-new electrified Artura supercar.
The Artura represents the opening of a whole new chapter for McLaren Automotive, possibly even a whole new book. It's based on a brand new carbon fibre monocoque tub, and unlike in any of the firm's other models, it's one built in-house. It's powered by an all-new wide-angle turbocharged V6 engine. It has a new 8-speed twin-clutch gearbox, new axles, a lightweight superformed aluminium body, a new interior layout, and a new electrical architecture. Joining towards the bottom of McLaren's showroom range, the Artura is a natural successor for the old 570 and 600 Sport Series cars, although much of the technology within the car will go on to be used on higher-end models too.
Which is to say nothing of the headline news here. This is, of course, McLaren's very first plug-in hybrid supercar. It's had regular performance hybrids before, like the P1 and the Speedtail. This is the first McLaren you can plug into the mains, and you do it right here. Comes with a 3-pin plug that you just plug into your domestic outlet, stick the other end in there. It'll take 2.5 hours to charge from flat from a domestic plug, and that's good enough for about 19 miles of WLTP range. Now that may mean a lot to you. It might make this car more attractive as a sort of a modern, sustainable prospect. It might mean very little to you other than being able perhaps to sort of sneak away from your house early in the morning without waking the kids or the neighbours. For McLaren as a business though, a plug-in hybrid supercar is a really strategically important product because it keeps them in business effectively. It allows them to keep selling cars in a context of ever-tightening European emissions legislations, and while the rest of the product range is becoming, more and more outmoded, less and less compliant with those regulations, let's say, who knows, maybe less and less socially acceptable, this car should be the new bedrock of the company's business. It's really key. At the press launch last night, they had a wonderful technical cutaway image. It was full scale, and it sort of allowed you to look at the car as if you were wearing X-ray spectacles, which I think really neat trick. And that allowed you to appreciate how well packaged, how efficient and clever the design and layout of this car is. If you take a line straight back from the trailing edge of the door there, about to the trailing edge of the lateral intake there, that space in the car, within that space you've got a 7.4 kilowatt hour drive battery packaged right on the floor as low as it can get, and above that the car's conventional fuel tank. Behind that you've then got a brand new wide angle V6 turbo petrol engine, which produces about 580 horsepower on its own, and then behind that again you've got an 8-speed automatic twin clutch gearbox, and for the first time in a McLaren, a torque vectoring active differential, an eDiff. Now, we've criticised McLarens in the past for not having componentry like that and for suffering in terms of their limit handling and adjustability as a result. So this car should answer some of those criticisms, we hope. As a whole, the hybrid system adds 150 kilos to this car, which I think isn't very much, but more than half of that weight saving has been offset in various places. The new carbon tub is lighter than the old one, as well as being stiffer. The powertrain itself is a lot lighter than the old V8. The gearbox is lighter too. The bodywork is all superformed aluminium, which again saves weight compared to that stuff on the old car. The electrical architecture is lighter. As a whole, this car is less than 1.5 tons in running order. And I think a Ferrari 296 GTB is a good 100 kilos heavier, like for like. And the old 570S is probably only 50 kilos lighter itself. So however you judge this car, you sort of have to admit that in terms of engineering and layout and design, McLaren has done its job. It's done tremendously well to hide all of the extra weight and complexity and deliver something that still feels genuinely compact and fit for purpose as a small supercar. So we'll see how it drives. Right, here we are. This is McLaren Supercar Interior version 2.0 or something like that. Still got the dihedral sort of scissor doors, if you like, but they've redesigned those so that they open a bit less wide. So when you go down to a supermarket to buy your pint of milk, as you do in a car like this, you're less likely to whack the car in the next parking space. They're always thinking, aren't they? The layout is similar in lots of ways to the one you might be used to, different in some of the details. You've still got your big main boot in the front of the car, big enough for a couple of sort of bigger cases. You've also got a shelf behind the seats here where you could fit a couple of smaller bags, maybe one bigger flight case. So there's plenty of usable space, and the cabin is pretty roomy. There's good headroom. I've got a nice straight driving position, not too much wheel arch intrusion in the footwell, and I've got a really comfy seat. Now you can have a slightly sportier, lower set, I think they call it the competition seat, which adjusts quite cleverly to accommodate particularly tall drivers. But this is the standard comfort seat, and it's comfy as, you know, I don't think you would necessarily feel the need to change this, even if you were, you know, a bigger driver. In terms of the control layout, there have been some changes. They've moved the instrument binnacle here from the dashboard onto a mounting on the steering column itself, which is quite clever because it means however you set the steering column, you can always see the screen behind it. You don't have to move the one to see the other, which is quite clever. The other big change in terms of the primary controls is they've moved these powertrain and chassis controls from the little toggles down on the transmission tunnel actually onto the binnacle itself. Now when they're up there, obviously they're closer to your natural line of sight. They're easier to just flick without taking your hand off the wheel. I think that's a real improvement to the usability of the car in terms of, you know, when you want to change it from electric mode, comfort mode, sport mode, track mode on the powertrain controller, when you want manual mode on the gearbox, or when you want to change the chassis modes, the handling modes. You know, it's easy to do. You can almost do it without looking. It's just a quick flick of that controller. The rest of the architecture has changed too. Of course, you've still got transmission controls down here on the tunnel, but this 8-inch infotainment system is a brand new system as well, and it's just a bit easier to get on with than the McLaren infotainment systems of old, which were never that good, let's be fair. The other thing I like are the paddles for the gear shifts. Now this isn't new, McLarens have had similar paddles for a while now, but they're one piece, and it means because it's a rigid piece of steel or aluminium there, whatever it is, you can either go up or down the box with either hand. You haven't got to flick one and flick the other. That is, I think, a really clever bit of thought out design. It's just a nice simple wheel for driving. Bravo. So, what on earth is an electrified plug-in hybrid McLaren like to drive? Here we are, we're going to find out. It's not making a great deal of noise at the moment, and that's because if there's charge in the battery, the car always starts in electric mode, which is where we are now. So what we've got is a supercar that's driven by its rear wheels, unlike some of the plug-in hybrid rivals we've seen so far, but only has about 95 horsepower and 170 pounds-foot of torque at the moment. So the performance level, well, it's not huge. Foot's on the floor now, and it's sort of accelerating at kind of, well, mid-range super mini pace, let's put it like that. It's not flying down the road, but there's enough performance here to, you know, to get you from A to B and to keep a low profile while you're doing it, and, you know, to feel, you know, slightly virtuous while you're at it. It's not an exciting car to drive in electric mode. It's not really feel like a supercar, although it's, you know, it's communicating in the same way McLaren does. But I guess if you've just done 200 miles really concentrating and enjoying what you're doing, having the option to do 15-20 miles just in a sort of a chilled out state like this in electric mode, hurting nobody, that's probably quite an appealing thing to have at the end of a long journey. So let us move into sport mode and hear this new V6. There it goes. Yeah, sounds alright that, doesn't it? And it's got plenty of performance. You might think, oh, that's only got a V6 engine. Surely McLaren needs a bigger engine than that. Well, 671 combined horsepower would seem to say different. There's loads of outright performance here, loads of torque too, and it sounds good, doesn't it? Not, you know, operatic or show-stopping like a Lamborghini V10, admittedly, but I think better than the old V8, which in some of McLaren's cars the last decade or so sounded a bit like an industrial threshing machine. You know, this one just has a little bit more sweetness and tunefulness about the way it sounds when it's revving. There it goes, and it revs too. It'll go to the far side of 8,000 RPM if you want it to. feel about the powertrain though. It's not like McLarens of old that had that sort of slightly under square cylinder feel, you know, the slightly latent, laggy power delivery in the lower mid-range, and then, you know, you felt like you had to be in the right gear to get the car to go really fast, and then, wow, it took off. This car has all of that torque feel from the electric motor, so it responds instantly and really strongly. And it keeps going as well. So don't think for a moment that because this car only has a V6, it's not gonna be fast enough for you. Trust me, it's a fast car. So that's the powertrain covered off. What about the ride and handling? Well, it's impressive. For a start off, you're sitting in something that feels still genuinely narrow for a supercar here. You can see out of it really well. They've kept the front scuttle really low. They've pulled the door mirrors all the way back. The pillars are about as skinny as they can make them, so you can see a lot out of the front of this car, and in other directions as well. And that means you can place it really easily. You can see where the front wheels are. You're also not constantly worried about squeezing it into its lane. You know, it doesn't feel wide. You're not worried that you're going to be clattering the cat's eyes with one set of wheels or in the ditch with the others, because it steers so intuitively and so well, but also because it is genuinely relatively compact, I think, for a supercar. The steering is a big factor, I have to say. It's still got this lovely hydraulic steering assistance, which makes it beautifully tactile. You can really feel what's going on at the front wheels. But it's also a really nicely weighted and paced steering system. It's really intuitive. It's not really direct like some supercars are. It doesn't take any assimilating. You know, you don't have to make an effort to kind of understand how quickly the car wants to turn and rotate. It just is really intuitive. I think that's part of the appeal of this car. It is a supercar that you could use for all sorts of things on any given day and in all sorts of ways, and enjoy it while you're doing it. It maybe isn't your sort of last gallon of fuel type supercar. It's more the sort of daily driver. And it's a bit of a shame to report that it could be a touch more exciting, perhaps have a bit more wow factor. I might feel differently about that once we've driven it on the track, but on the road I just wonder if for some people it might have that sort of slightly serious clinical character. If you were going to pick a car for your most sensational, memorable last driving experience ever, not sure this would be it. But if you're picking a supercar to just do anything and everything with, I think the Artura ought to be right up there. We will see, I guess. Track driving comes next. So here we are on track at Ascari, a handful of laps, just to find out if electrification has made this supercar better or worse. On the road, it definitely feels like an enhanced McLaren, I have to say, and maybe that should carry as much weight as anything. But the track handling stuff obviously matters. It needs to feel light enough, agile enough. It needs to have stamina. It needs to be able to go for as long as you're willing to. Let's see. There's the same lovely tactility to the steering. Plenty of reassuring power to the brakes. They're is all the power that you would want, I have to say, from this powertrain. The way it picks up from medium revs, we know, is very good, but it revs as well, produces lots of power. This does not feel like any kind of meek apologist, this car. It's top level. It's nice and easy and assured to drive as well. Fluent, accurate, tactile, like I said. It's not sort of darting and swiveling like a mid-engine Ferrari. And the application of an e-diff clearly hasn't changed that. It hasn't changed the fundamental character of the car. Just maybe makes it a little bit more adjustable in the tighter bends, but that's a faster one. It's got loads of stability through there. It's a proper fast car, this. It's not really interested in party tricks. I like that about it. Hangs on nice and hard through the banked corners, and the faster ones stops really well for the tighter ones. And it isn't showing any signs of flagging or slowing down. McLaren says this thing will do the equivalent of 40 miles on a Nardo handling track without any deterioration to the performance level. And so far, let me tell you, it is not slowing down.
The McLaren Artura has remarkable dynamic purity and purpose. It's enthralling to drive on road and track, and a better supercar in all sorts of ways because of electrification, while on the face of it, it's compromised surprisingly little by it. But it's clearly a hugely complex car with new technology throughout, and slightly worryingly, McLaren does seem still to be developing and taming that technology, even at this late stage in its project development. There were some cooling problems with certain cars at its Spanish press launch last week. One of our test sessions was cut short by smoke and overheating. Another launch car did actually catch fire, while some much less serious electronic problems were also reported. The company says that its press launch cars were effectively very late series production prototypes, some missing updated parts or control software, the former in particular explaining the problem with our track car in particular. Full production cars won't have the same technical problems, they say, so it ought to be that customers won't have anything to worry about. But rather than just take their word for it, we've decided to rank and pronounce fully on the Artura later, once we've driven a fully finished car in the UK. On this evidence, it could be just the model to take the company and so many of its customers into a new and exciting electrified era. But for now, after what seems like a long build-up already, we'll just have to wait that little bit longer to find out.